Hello there and welcome back to some more Forza Horizon 4. Today we are finally taking an overview of the cars that launched with the Fortune Island expansion. The expansion included 10 cars, and I said in a previous video that I could not cover these cars due to the fact that there was no sort of overall DLC screen to look at, but shout out to Durator who came up with a pretty good idea. He said, why don't you just favourite the cars in your garage and then you can look at them that way. So thank you Durator for having common sense when I do not. We begin with the first car, the 2018 BMW M5, 600 horsepower, 553 foot-pound torque, 4,370 pounds of weight, front-engined all-wheel drive S1 class, 806 PI. A very anticipated car. This is the new BMW M5, the first ever all-wheel drive M5, previously only featured in Need for Speed Payback, which is hardly a game you can really test a car on because it's a bit naff. But it's finally here in an actually good game, so we can take a look at the M5 properly. While I wouldn't say it's the best looking car in the world, the 5 Series have often been my favourite looking of all the BMWs, save for the E60, which I think is absolutely bloody hideous. And this one, while I wouldn't say it's a good looking car, it's certainly not particularly offensive, but in the way it drives, it is very, very good indeed. In fact, it's by far and away my favourite M5 to drive. It's just so much more secure. I prefer having all-wheel drive in the super saloons just because it makes them faster and a lot easier to drive, and ultimately that's what you're looking for when you buy one of these saloon cars. And the M5 certainly fits that. A very cool car, one that I do like quite a lot. Yeah, I really can't complain. I'm sure a lot of people are very happy to see this car in the game. I, for one, am one of those people, and yeah, just really nice to see another highly anticipated new car enter the game. Next up, we have the 2018 Exomotive Exosuit Off-Road, 252 horsepower, 230 foot-pound torque, 1,571 pounds of weight, front-engined rear-wheel drive, A-Class, a 729 PI. If you have not heard of Exomotive, you have not played Forza Motorsports 7. You might remember this car was added, or a version of this car, which is the track version of this car, was added into Forza Motorsports 7. That's the Exomotive Exosuit S, I believe it's called, and what that is essentially an MX-5 chassis with an LS engine at the front and a Cadillac CTS axle at the back, and it's very mental, and it tries to kill you every time you try and drive it. This car is the off-road version of that, and yes, it's still based on an MX-5. The engine in this, it's not quite as crazy on paper. This doesn't have an LS engine. In fact, I'm fairly certain it just has a tuned version of the standard Mazda engine. But nonetheless, it is pretty crazy. And if you don't like that MX-5 engine stock, well, you can put a 787B engine in it, because of course you can. And then it's very, very fun. Yeah, it's a car I do quite like. One of my more favourite off-road buggies in the game. Essentially, think of this thing as the aerial nomad built in your shed. And you've pretty much got the Exomotive, a pretty cool car, and one that I do like quite a bit. Next up, we have the mentalist of this pack, the 2018 Funko Motorsports F9, 1,750 horsepower, 1,475 foot-pound torque, 2,800 pounds of weight, rear-engined rear-wheel drive, S1 class, 860 PI. Yes, you heard me right, 1,750 horsepower. This is the third most powerful car ever to be in a Forza game. This is also the most powerful standard car in the game. Yes, it's pretty mental. As you'd expect, driving it is very terrifying. It is a very soft suspension. This car likes to fly everywhere, and it has the worst gearbox known to man because it has a 5-speed gearbox that tops out at about 110 miles an hour. And it's pretty useless unless you do some pretty radical modifications to it. Yeah, it's mental, it's just not much of a racer. I'm not really a fan of these buggies. I think I spoke about this when the Can-Am Maverick got added. But this one I will certainly give a pass. The Exomotive I give a pass because it's mental, and the F9 I also do because it is also very mental in terms of its power and stuff. Not much of a usable vehicle, but certainly a pretty cool one, one that you can have quite a bit of fun with doing somersaults and whatever you particularly want to do. Next up, probably one of the weakest cars in this pack in my opinion. This is the 2015 Hoonigan Gymkhana 8 Fiesta ST-RX 43. 600 horsepower, 663 foot-pound torque, 2,746 pounds of weight, front-engined all-wheel drive, S1 class, 885 PI. This, of course, as the name would suggest, is the car that Ken Block used in Gymkhana 8, and it's a Ford Fiesta rally car. We've got quite a few of these in the game already. In fact, we've got 2. This one is a previous generation to one of those, I believe. I'm not quite sure how the statistics compare with those other Fiesta ST rallycross cars, but what I do have to say is essentially it's not going to be different enough to really warrant it being a different car. I think this car would have probably been more fit as a Forza Fun shop car instead of an actual full-blown DLC car. I'm sure it's iconic. I'm sure some Ken Block fans are happy with this, people who like Gymkhana and stuff. Personally, I'm really not much a fan of that, and I really don't like cars that are plastered in Monster Energy drink logos, which this one is. So yeah, I can't be too positive about this. Honestly, probably the weakest car in the pack, in my opinion. But, you know, I'm sure it will have its fans. I'm just not one of them. Next up, we have a pretty interesting car, the return of the 2002 Koenigsegg CC8S, previously seen in the last-gen Forza Motorsport games, but it has now made the jump to the next-gen. 564 horsepower, 469 foot-pounds torque, 2,811 pounds of weight, mid-engined rear-wheel drive, S1 Class 883 PI. This one is interesting. This is one of 4 cars in this expansion that is not available in the auto show by default. The way you get the CC8S is by opening chest number 5 on Fortune Island. If you don't know, Fortune Island have these little treasure chests that are full of 1,000,000 credits, and occasionally they chuck out cars, and the CC8S is one of those cars. Again, it is in chest number 5. I love Koenigsegg, and I love this car because it is, well, the first ever Koenigsegg powered by a supercharged Ford engine. This car could achieve over 240 miles an hour, which in 2002 was insane. I don't think it ever quite beat the McLaren F1 for the record before the Bugatti Veyron came along, but I have no doubt in my mind it could. Of course, Koenigsegg have gone on to bigger and, well, better things, with the Agera RS and so on and so forth now being the fastest production car in the world. But it is nice to remember where it all started, and the CC8S is where that is. An absolutely phenomenal car. I'm very, very happy to see this car added into the game once again. It's one I've been using quite a lot. It is a nice driving car to boot. And yeah, I'm a huge Koenigsegg fanboy, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to wave my fanboy license around here and say I'm very, very happy with the CC8S. It might be my favourite car in the entire expansion, to be honest. Next up, we have another returning car from the previous gen, although this car was only featured in the original Forza Horizon. This is the 2012 Lamborghini Aventador J, 700 horsepower, 509 foot-pound torque, 3,620 pounds of weight, mid-engined all-wheel drive, S1 Class 871. This car is another car which is concealed in one of the chests. This is in fact in the last chest you get, chest number 10. The Aventador J is a concept car produced by a Lamborghini. Basically, they got told to make something mental and different for an auto show, so what they did is basically take the entirety of the roof off of an Aventador, and as a result, you got this pretty mental looking contraption. Ultimately, sort of similar to the Fiesta, this one probably could be argued that it is essentially not necessary, especially in a world where we've had the 650S Spider and the Gallardo Performante. You could say the Aventador J sort of fits into that, where it's just a convertible version of a car previously in the game. But I will give the J a little bit more of a pass, purely because it is a lot different to the standard Aventador in terms of how it looks. It's not just the Spider. It has a lot of different sort of aesthetic features to it than the standard Aventador does have. Admittedly, performance-wise, it is kind of just a diminished Aventador, although I will say, interestingly enough, 3,620 pounds of weight. I believe this is a lot lighter than the standard Aventador. Don't quote me on that, though, but I believe it is. Yeah, still, it is a fun car to drive around in. It's certainly a crazy car to drive around in. I can't complain too much about it, I'm afraid. I do quite like the Aventador J. Again, maybe one of the weaker cars in the pack, purely because it is just a different version of a car we already have in the game. But, you know, it is certainly, I believe, a lot better than sort of the other previous just sort of spider versions of cars. This is actually something a little bit different. Next up, we have the cover car of this expansion, the 2019 Lamborghini Urus, 641 horsepower, 626 foot-pound torque, 4,850 pounds of weight, front-engine all-wheel drive, A-Class 795 PI. The Urus, interestingly enough, despite being the cover car of the expansion, this is also another car that is locked by default. You get this car through treasure chest number 2. So it is one that you do get very early on, but it's still a bit weird that it's concealed in the treasure chests. Nevertheless, this is the first video game outing for the new Lamborghini Urus, Lamborghini's first ever SUV. Certainly a controversial one. Basically, it's an Audi Q7 with a Lamborghini badge on it. It has an Audi engine, 4-litre twin turbo. Admittedly, it is boosted in power up to 641 horsepower, which is really not that far off what you get from a Bentayga, which is also basically an Audi Q7. And that has the W12 twin turbo, and this only has a standard V8 twin turbo, which is interesting. Yeah, it's one of the quickest SUVs in the game. In terms of its handling, it's very understeery. Does drive a lot like other Q7 derivative cars, the Bentayga, stuff like that. Yeah, it's not quite as sharp as I was expecting a Lamborghini SUV to be. Personally, I'm a little bit disappointed this car isn't as crazy as, well, Lamborghini's only other off-road car they ever made, the LM002, but I mean, it is the Lamborghini that's got to sell, similar to the Huracan. Lamborghini is sort of like everyone else in this industry, just sort of trying to survive, and the way you survive these days is by producing an SUV, and that's what the Urus is. There's certainly better SUVs out there. I'm personally much more a fan of the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. But, you know, if you want one of the quickest SUVs on the market, if you want the prestige of the Lamborghini badge, and you've got to admit, even if you don't particularly like the Urus, you've got to admit it does look a little bit cool, yeah, it is the car for you. Next up, we have, by far and away, the slowest car out of everything in this expansion, the I keep wanting to call it pack expansion, the 1953 Morris Minor Series 2 Traveller. Scotian rejoice, you've got another minor in the game. 29 horsepower, 40 foot-pound torque, or 1,757 pounds of weight. Front-engine rear-wheel drive, D-Class, or 100 PI. The Morris Minor, a British institution, a truly wretched car. And the Traveller is the Woody Wagon version of that. I'd honestly prefer a mini Woody Wagon, but I guess we've got to get the minor in there somewhere. It's a Series 2, I believe the other minor in this game is a Series 3, so it is a little bit different. This car is slightly less powerful than that one, and obviously weighs a little bit more because it is a Woody Wagon. In terms of modifications, very similar to the standard minor. You can put a motorbike engine in it and send it off a cliff. It's kind of cool from sort of a cult British perspective. Honestly though, it's probably one of my least preferred cars in this expansion, just because it doesn't really do a lot for me. I'm not really a fan of the minor to begin with. I like it from sort of a meme aspect, from a sort of British institution yada 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 standpoint. But it's certainly not a car I would drive by choice personally. And again, the only real use I had for this was put a motorbike engine in it, get the achievement for the danger sign, and then throw it into the back of my garage again. But, you know, depending on your liking for the minor, you might get more use out of it, I don't know. Next up, a car with a slightly broken thumbnail, which seems to just increase in size every time you decide to do something to this car. Also, the car that you are given straight off the bat by this game, the 2017 RAM Rebel TRX Concept. You will get one of these as soon as you load up Fortune Island, you drive to the festival location in it, and then it gives you it, but you can buy another one from the auto show if you so want one. 575 horsepower, 550 foot-pound torque, 5,319 pounds of weight, front-engined all-wheel drive, A-Class 716 PI. The TRX Concept is essentially Chrysler's idea of the Raptor, pretty much. I believe they had they have the standard Rebel, and the TRX is essentially an upgraded version of that. That has, of course, the Hellcat engine in it, admittedly strangely detuned. You'd expect them to just do what they did with every other car they've put the Hellcat engine in, which is just put the full fat 707 horsepower in it, but for some reason they've decided to restrict this one back a little bit. I don't know if it's a case to preserve reliability or tow ratings or something like that, but nevertheless the TRX isn't quite as powerful as stuff like the Jeep Trailcat and the Trackhawk and so on and so forth. Yeah, it is another RAM. Of course, we've already got the Power Wagon in the game, and I believe you can put a Hellcat engine in that by default, so you could argue the TRX doesn't really have that much purpose, but obviously this expansion did kind of need an off-roady truck to sort of fit in, again, with the whole Fortune Island theme, and the TRX does supply that, whether you like the vehicle or not. You could say there were trucks that would have been better suited to put in this game, but to be honest with you, we've got a load of trucks in the game already, so trying to decide sort of different trucks and stuff, we are slowly running out of ones that you could put in the game. I personally would have preferred sort of an older truck, you know, something a bit retro, which is not something we have a lot of. But the TRX concept, a pretty interesting car, and a pretty good driving one as well. If you want an upgrade from your standard Power Wagon to 500, then the TRX is a pretty good place to look. And finally, another returning car from the 360 era and another locked car. This is the 2010 Saleen S5 Raptor concept car, and you unlock this by getting chest number 8. 650 horsepower, 630 foot-pound torque, 3,365 pounds of weight, mid-engined rear-wheel drive, S1 class 873. I was actually quite surprised, sort of when this expansion first came out, once we found out the news of what cars were going to be in it. The Saleen S5 was one of the cars that got a lot of liking from the community, which is weird. Again, the Raptor's never really been a car I've been that much of a fan of. I don't think it looks particularly good. I will say it looks a hell of a lot better in sort of the new next gen. In previous sort of Forza games, I really didn't think much of it, but seeing this car in different screenshots, the yellow on this car really does pop. Which does help make it look better. It does sound fantastic as well, I will give it that. It's got a supercharged, I'm assuming Ford engine, although don't quote me on that. The S5S was essentially supposed to be Saleen's new supercar after the S7 entered production. Unfortunately, it would not quite come to be, and only one was ever produced. But you can drive that one in this game and cry that there was not another American supercar along with the Ford GT. For those of you who are fans of American supercars, you can drive it now, which is nice. And again, it does make an absolutely cracking noise. There is achievements attached to most of the cars here, and you can read about those if you open the achievement screen. And yeah, that's sort of it for the Fortune Island expansion cars. Overall, a pretty good set of cars if you ask me. There's a couple of ones that I prefer over others. If you ask me to sort of give my highlights from the pack, the CC8S I really like a lot. The new Urus is cool. The Aventador J is cool. And I do like the M5 and the Exocet quite a lot. And the F9 is just a mentalist. Cars I'm not a particular fan of, the Gymkhana, Fiesta, the Minor, and the Rebel. They're all a little bit sort of, we already have those in the game, so sort of what really is the point of them. And the Saleen's a car which I've never really been a huge fan of in general. Anyway, but it's nice to see it back in the game. So we have a good mixture as well, it's worth pointing out, with this expansion. I was expecting sort of all off-roading cars, and that's the way it sort of looked like it was going. But we've actually got a good mix. You know, you've got a couple of new cars, brand new cars, you know, the Urus and the M5. You've got some fan favourites return, the CC8S, the Aventador J, the S5S Raptor. You've got some things that are a little bit different in, say, the Minor. And then, of course, you've got what you would expect from this expansion, which is the off-road cars, the F9, the Exocet, again, the Urus and the Rebel, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, a solid enough expansion. The actual gameplay itself is pretty good. It does feel a little bit samey. It doesn't feel quite as revolutionary as, say, something like Blizzard Mountain felt. But you can certainly get some fun out of this expansion. There is some really good driving roads, and it is a very scenic place. Certainly a good place to take pictures and so on and so forth. So feel free to pick up the expansion if you like. It's available as part of the expansion pass. I'm not too sure how much it costs to buy individually. If I had to guess, somewhere around $15, same as all the previous expansions did. Anyways, that's your overview of the DLC cars that launched with Fortune Island. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.